say to myself, in whatever I'm going through, my faith is greater than my fear. I believe in
This isn't just scandal. This is a full-blown royal explosion hiding behind polished smiles and carefully staged appearances, because while the world was distracted by public speeches and staged charity events, something far darker was quietly unfolding beneath the surface. Something so calculated, so precise, that it threatens to rip apart the very foundation of royal power itself. At the exact moment when whispers of failure began circling Meghan Markle's crumbling brand in the United States, yes, the same brand once praised, now mocked, dissected, and openly questioned, she didn't retreat. No, she struck back, and not subtly, not cautiously, but with a level of boldness that felt almost reckless. Why now? Why escalate tensions when everything already seemed on the edge of collapse? That's the question nobody is answering. Because while public opinion sharpened its knives and rumors swirled about a possible return to Britain for the Invictus Games, something else was happening in parallel, something much bigger than a simple visit, something that smelled less like charity and more like strategy. And then came the podcast, the so-called casual conversation between JJ and Mark Dolan that suddenly turned into a pressure point, exposing cracks nobody wanted to admit were there. They didn't just discuss a visit, they dissected it, tore it apart, questioned every detail. A family reunion or a calculated re-entry? Because let's be honest, timing is everything. And the timing here, suspiciously perfect. A struggling image in America paired with a high-profile event in Britain under the shadow of a monarchy already strained by years of silent conflict. Coincidence? Or choreography? But what really sent shockwaves through this already volatile narrative wasn't the visit itself, it was the location. Villa Park. Not just any venue, but a place deeply, almost emotionally tied to Prince William. A stadium that represents loyalty, identity, and something intensely personal. So why choose it? Out of all the venues available, why that one? That's where the tone shifted. That's where the whispers turned into accusations. Because suddenly, it didn't look like a neutral decision anymore. It looked intentional. A message. A provocation. A challenge thrown right at the feet of the future king. And then the insider appeared. Always there's an insider, right? But this one didn't hesitate. No vague suggestions, no careful phrasing, just blunt, cutting clarity. According to this voice from behind the curtain, the entire trip was nothing but a perfectly crafted illusion, a distraction, a cover story. Not about athletes, not about duty, but about survival. Because behind the polished image, behind the speeches and carefully rehearsed narratives, the Sussex brand was allegedly suffocating under the weight of its own expectations. Deals stalling, opportunities shrinking, public trust slipping. And suddenly, Britain wasn't just home anymore. It was a lifeline. So the question grew louder. Are they returning because they want to or because they have to? Because when power starts slipping, when influence begins to fade, people don't just walk away quietly. They make moves, big moves, risky moves, moves that don't always make sense on the surface, but reveal everything when you look deeper. And just when the pressure reached its peak, when the narrative was tightening like a noose, Meghan Markle broke her silence. Not carefully, not diplomatically, but forcefully, almost aggressively. She didn't just deny the accusations, she dismantled them piece by piece, rejecting the idea that she needed anything from the royal family. Independent, self-sufficient, untouchable, that was the image she projected. But here's the thing, when someone insists that strongly, doesn't it make you wonder what they're trying to prove or who they're trying to convince? Because what came next didn't feel like defense anymore. It felt like offense. Direct, personal, unfiltered. Her words didn't just push back against the rumors, they targeted Prince William himself, questioning his leadership, challenging his capability, mocking the very structure he represents. And that's where everything changed, because this wasn't just about a trip anymore. This wasn't about public image. This became something far more dangerous, a battle of authority, pride, and control unfolding in plain sight while everyone pretended it was just another headline. And yet, William said nothing. Absolute silence, no response, no denial, no retaliation, just composure. But in situations like this, silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's preparation, because while the world watched the headlines, something else was already in motion behind palace walls. Something quiet, something methodical, something that would soon turn this entire story on its head. And the real question is, was this all already known before any of us even heard a single word? And while the silence hung heavy in the air, almost too heavy, almost unnatural, the real storm was already building where no cameras could reach inside the cold, controlled corridors of royal finance, where numbers numbers don't lie unless someone is making them lie. Because this is where everything began to unravel, not with a public argument, not with a press statement, but with something far quieter and far more dangerous. A routine audit. Routine, predictable, safe, or at least that's what it was supposed to be. But what happens when routine suddenly stops being routine? What happens when numbers don't align, when records don't match? When something feels off, that's exactly the moment when the shift occurred. A discrepancy. Small at first, almost invisible. The kind of detail most people would overlook, but not this time. Because once one inconsistency appeared, it led to another and another, forming a pattern too precise to be accidental. Money, significant money, was missing. Not misplaced, not delayed. Missing, and the deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became that this wasn't chaos. This was design. Someone had orchestrated this with precision, masking transfers, disguising movements, layering transactions so carefully that it almost felt untouchable. But here's where it gets unsettling. The trail didn't just disappear. It led somewhere, straight across the ocean, into an anonymous account in the United States. Anonymous, but not invisible, because once the direction was clear, everything accelerated. Investigators pulled apart encrypted records, dissected access logs, retraced every digital footprint left behind. And what they uncovered wasn't just a financial irregularity, it was a network. Controlled, calculated, and disturbingly close to home. Because the real shock wasn't that money had moved, it was how it moved. Through someone inside, someone trusted, an accounting assistant quietly positioned within the system, someone who knew exactly where the blind spots were, someone who understood how to move large sums without triggering alarms. Think about that for a second. This wasn't an outsider hacking in. This was someone already inside the walls. And suddenly, the story wasn't about missing funds anymore. It was about infiltration. And then came the part that changes everything, the connection. Because as the final layers were stripped away, as the hidden routes were exposed, as the anonymous account lost its anonymity, one name began to echo through the investigation. A name already at the center of controversy. A name already dominating headlines. Meghan Markle. And that's when the narrative stopped being speculation and turned into something explosive. Because now, it wasn't just about public clashes or media statements, it was about motive. Why would someone risk everything for this? That question became impossible to ignore. And the answers? They weren't simple. Because behind the polished image of success, behind the carefully curated brand, there were whispers of pressure. Financial pressure. Projects that didn't deliver, deals that didn't last, expectations that became too heavy to carry. And when pressure builds like that, when appearances start slipping, people don't just accept it. They react, sometimes quietly, sometimes strategically, and sometimes in ways no one expects. But it didn't stop there, because the money wasn't just about survival, it was also about control, about maintaining influence, about funding something that had to succeed no matter the cost. The Invictus Games, a global event, a powerful symbol, but also an enormous financial machine that doesn't run on goodwill alone. And when sponsors begin to pull away, when support starts drying up, the cracks begin to show. So what happens when there's a gap too big to hide? Do you cancel, or do you find a way to fill it, no matter where the money comes from? And this is where the tension reached its breaking point. Because once the pieces were connected, once the story formed a complete picture, there was no going back. Orders were issued, departments locked down, staff suspended, every connection scrutinized, every detail examined. The palace didn't react publicly, but internally it moved fast, ruthlessly fast. Because this wasn't just a financial issue anymore. This was betrayal. And betrayal, especially at this level, doesn't get ignored. But here's the most unsettling part. Even as everything was being uncovered, even as the walls were closing in, there was no response, no apology, no explanation, just silence. Again, and that silence, it didn't calm the situation. It intensified it. Because when the evidence grows louder and the response stays quiet, it raises one terrifying possibility. What if this isn't the end of the story? What if this is only the part we're allowed to see?